and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who says he's moving to Austin, Texas, unless I build him a new house. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. I did recently move into a new house, but it's not new enough,
right?
And there could be more space. I don't have room for a state-of-the-art food franchise in there, so I really just need a little bit more out of you, Daryl Grove.
Oh, so we're going to talk US Under-17s today. We're going to talk senior team. They've scheduled a friendly. We're going to talk possible coaching appointments. But first, the news that really shook me last night was seeing that Columbus Crew's owner, I've forgotten his first name, it's Precourt, right?
Anthony Precourt.
Anthony Precourt is... I want to say he's half threatening to move to Austin. He's half actually already doing it.
Actually, my semi-funny recreation parody of what's happening isn't actually what's happening. It's more like if you said what you said as the introduction and I said, no, Daryl, I'm just exploring my options in case you decide that you don't want me to have a new house.
But you've already booked
then
a ticket.
Maybe I'll have this other house in Austin that I've already looked into and talked to people about and am sort of committed to going to.
So if anyone hasn't seen this news, right, the Columbus Crew owner really is saying if I don't get help building a new stadium in downtown Columbus, then I'm going to move the whole franchise to Austin, Texas.
See, he's doing that sort of successful businessman thing of not saying that, but meaning that. So what he said is he is exploring strategic options because the Columbus Crew need a new stadium is what he says. That basically, even though it was the first soccer-specific stadium was built in 1999, it doesn't have the amenities that allow it to make money the way other MLS franchises are. So I think Columbus is 20th out of the 22 teams in terms of match day income. So he's saying we need a new stadium to make that happen. Then they're saying, oh, so then do you need it to be publicly financed? No, I haven't asked for any public money, and I'm willing to entertain offers, but then he's not. So it feels like maybe he's sort of saying what he needs to say to not be 100% the villain, and then move the team to Texas.
And the record is, right, he bought the team from either the Hunt family or the Hunt group in 2013, and it seems like maybe this was the plan all along, was to move the team to Austin.
Yeah, because even in that contract in 2013, apparently it said, you can't move the team for 10 years if you're going to move them at all, but then there's also some sort of escape clause that they haven't really said what it is, but it says unless he wants to move them to Austin. Then there's other interesting things that come into play here, because Don Garber has come out and said, we don't really like relocating, we don't really enjoy when franchises move, but we understand why this might need to happen. Then you think about it from another standpoint, which was that, earlier in the summer, they accepted bids from different expansion cities who are looking to maybe get new franchises, become an expansion franchise.
Yeah.
Austin did not file for one, but this summer, Major League Soccer did register 2 team names as trademarks for Austin.
Yeah, so this is being talked about behind the scenes.
Basically, I think everyone who has met with Precourt has come away saying, we did not realize how far along in the process he was in terms of moving the club to Austin.
So we got a great tweet from Leo. Leo said, will they name the new team the MK Don Garbers?
I mean, they probably should.
A great reference to what happened in England, where Wimbledon essentially moved to Milton Keynes, renamed themselves MK Dons. Our old friend Ryan Bailey, obviously not happy. He started supporting AFC Wimbledon when that happened. Columbus fans don't really have the option to support. This is kind of a pro-rel question, right? If this team leaves, kind of like the Baltimore Colts left, they don't have the option of starting a new team that could one day compete, right?
Well,
because MLS will never be open to the new Columbus team.
Which Baltimore Colts are you referring to?
I don't know.
The Baltimore Colts left.
I saw a 30 for 30.
You're right. I was thinking because the Colts left to go to Indianapolis, but then the Browns fled in the middle of the night to go to Baltimore. So it's a weird, confusing situation.
I actually don't know.
It was the band played on. I think it's the one that you're talking about, and that's the Colts leaving. Yeah, you're correct.
So what happens to soccer in Columbus? This is the weird thing to me, is just a year ago, we were thinking of soccer in Columbus. It's the home of Dos Acero. It's the spiritual home of the US men's national team. Then Rafa Marquez breaks the Dos Acero, right, on the way to the US not qualify. First game in the Hex, right? Breaks the Dos Acero, and now Columbus is possibly losing its Major League Soccer team.
Maybe not possibly enough, and that's why he wants to move them to Austin.
Very nice. I feel like if I'm a soccer fan in Columbus, I'm thinking of turning my back on soccer full time.
I mean, before we get to that, because I don't disagree, I want to say 2 things. Number 1, sorry for taking us down the 30 for 30 path, but I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. I hate the Baltimore Ravens, so I had to pause.
You're a Cleveland Browns fan?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Cleveland Browns and Washington Redskins. We've talked about this before.
Right.
2, I would say that the MK Don Garbers, a better name than the Austin Athletic or Austin FC, which are the 2 names that they've registered. 3, Columbus fans, it's really depressing because not only would they lose a team, but if this did happen, it wouldn't be until 2019. So you'd still have one more season that I think one season ticket holder described as like watching a loved one die for a year.
Right. Is that why we saw people returning their seat? You showed me a tweet, I think, from before.
I guess the ticket sales or the ad sales or whomever, I guess ticket sales for
returns.
Columbus, they're getting returns, but they didn't know this was happening. They didn't know this announcement was coming until it appeared on social media. So then all of a sudden they started getting all these calls. They weren't prepared at all. So I think it's been sort of a chaotic day for everyone involved, including the fans, who are just more than a little bit devastated.
So I know that the San Jose franchise went to Houston a few years back, but that wasn't like a hostile move in the same way, right? So this would be the first time, as I understand it, in Major League Soccer history where a team owner has just been like, yeah, thanks fans, we're leaving, we're going to another city.
I'm just going to throw this out there. Buy Chivas. What are you doing? Buy Chivas USA if you want to move a franchise.
Because you could have moved that anywhere, right?
Yeah. Because I think you hit upon this idea, which is that he bought them, I forget what the price was, but it was above market value at the time.
It was like $68 million, I want to say.
But I'm going to assume still cheaper than an expansion fee. And so maybe that comes into it. It's like,
and it comes pre-built, right?
Yeah,
it's prefabbed.
You don't have to go through all of the rigmarole of getting the bid together and getting all the preparation together.
You don't have to do an expansion draft where you get other teams' leftover players.
You just buy a club and move them.
Yeah.
And that is sort of the nature of American sports. Just watch the beginning of basketball.
Yeah, I was about to
the Minneapolis Lakers moved to Los Angeles where there are no lakes.
So, okay, and the weird thing is this is happening in the context of the US failing to qualify for the World Cup, right? Columbus moved to Austin where there is no crew.
Yes. But there is athletic.
It's happening in the context of the US failing to qualify for the World Cup, like the possibility of major changes at the top of US soccer, maybe the way that the federation and the game is structured in the country. Does this feel like any way a positive, or is this just more of the nightmare week that US soccer is having? And not US soccer, the federation, American soccer. Is it more of the nightmare week American soccer is having?
I mean, the thing is, I don't want to...
Unless you live in Austin.
I don't want to take away... I want to say this doesn't relate. And I want to say that only because, for me, a U.S. soccer fan and a fan of all things soccer, especially when it comes to the United States, I don't want to try to internalize what Columbus fans are feeling as very acute pain and frustration and sadness, especially if this move happens. So I'll say it's very bad for soccer in the country. I mean, it's sad for soccer in the country, but it's much more personal for a Columbus fan.
That's fair.
That said, if this move does happen, I am officially starting the movement that Matt Free Stadium becomes the home stadium for the United States. So at least loyal Columbus fans, it becomes like, that's fine. We get Anthony Precourt out of there and PSV, Precourt Sports Ventures.
Yeah,
that's annoying.
Not a fan of that.
We get them out of there, and then that becomes the shrine of American soccer.
Right, first of all, either he knew that Precourt Sports Ventures sounds like PSV and he thought it was cute, or he doesn't know soccer and therefore didn't know that, and that's equally annoying.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But what are you proposing goes into that Columbus Stadium then?
I think nothing. We just make it like the fortress for the United States.
Oh, I see.
It kind of already is that until Jurgen Klinsmann comes along, and then maybe Bruce Arena as well, although he didn't have a chance.
I could see maybe. I was saying earlier that you can't do an AFC Wimbledon thing where you end up rising to the same level because there's no entry into Major League Soccer. But I could see a grassroots maybe soccer team taking hold there. They just have a much better stadium than, say, a team like Detroit City FC has.
Yeah, it would be FC United of Columbus.
Yeah.
FC Knights of Columbus. That seems like a good work. Because I do want to say one more time that it does seem like there have been efforts by fan-owned groups or at least fan-backed groups to buy the club. Those were rejected.
Oh,
there was a 50-50 ownership offer as well as a overall takeover offer that were both rejected. Then he says he never got any serious offers to buy the club. So it seems like there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. Then there's his claim that they need a new stadium because it's so far away from downtown. It's 6 miles away from downtown. From what we read, 20 minutes in rush hour traffic? That seems a little bit disingenuous. So it gets to, it's not making enough money as we would like. And even if that's true, that feels more like I need something to be able to break up with Columbus.
This feels to me also like it could be the nail in the coffin in terms of the argument for Major League Soccer single entity. Because this is a major thing that we hadn't seen happen before in this way. That is another, you can't really get invested in your club because just like those NFL teams, these things could leave town. They could uproot and leave town, and they don't have roots in the community in the same way. And that's really concerning to me.
Yeah, I mean, especially and again, this is the nature of American sports and it's a business. That's the way it works. But just that sort of Major League Soccer maybe already involved in it or aware of the discussions before anybody else was.
Those names didn't get registered accidentally.
No, they did not. And I know that they
don't have 1,000 monkeys on 1,000 computers registering trademarks.
I mean, they do, to be fair, they do, from what we've heard, tend to register names in places where they think there could be expansion one day because they don't want to deal with like copyright trademark
Yeah, I know
issues.
that.
But that seems a little coincidental that they would go specifically with two names in Austin where there was no expansion paperwork filed.
Yep.
And then just Don Garber is sort of like, we don't like it when they move, but, this is fine. It's just sort of like, oh, it's okay. So you like it when they move.
He says in a room surrounded by fire.
Just he's wearing like Austin Athletic, like a jacket. Is like, yeah, I'm not aware of what's happening, but it seems like it could work. They have very nice merchandise.
I think if anything, we're going to create one more team that is against Major League Soccer. You'll end up with maybe a Columbus team that is like an FC United of Columbus type team that is very anti-MLS.
Also, I want to say to your earlier point, with that in mind, yes, you might get like one team that rises up in Columbus, but also ask MK Dons how well that move worked out for them in terms of how popular they are.
Yeah.
If you have the Austin Athletic or Austin FC, they are going to be strongly disliked by a lot of the league.
Before we move on to US Under-17s, can I also just note that Austin fans have lost a team in the same circumstances in the USL.
That's
Do you remember
right.
Austin Aztecs?
Yep.
I think moved to Orlando City because Orlando City knew there was scope to build a USL team, then get the franchise to Major League Soccer.
Yeah.
So I think they lost a team for kind of the same reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the same token, like I can't fault them for being excited about it. If there were an expansion team, or if there was like, I don't know, if the Revolution in England or New England were suddenly like, yeah, we're coming to Richmond, I'd be like, well, okay, we've got an MLS franchise. This is kind of awesome.
Yeah.
But I'm also aware that causes like heartache and sadness where they came from. So I'm not trying to say that Austin don't deserve an MLS franchise. It seems like they do. It seems like there's enough of a fan base there and enough interest in the sport that they would do well. It just feels like under this situation, it's not ideal.
It's almost like the franchise system creates winners and losers and is not a good setup to make people happy.
The
almost,
devil, you say. The devil, you
except
say.
owners who can do whatever they want.
Well, there is that, yeah.
Hey, shall we move on?
To happier things?
To happier things,
Yes.
especially US national teamed happier things. So if you DVR'd the US Under-17s versus Paraguay quarterfinal, round of 16, Under-17 World Cup game, spoiler alert, they won big.
They did.
They won 5-0, a hat-trick from Timothy Weah, a goal from Andrew Carlton, and a goal from Josh Sargent. And it was the type of performance that got us really excited, especially after the travails of the last week, which, to be clear, they're ongoing, and we're still obviously down about that whole thing, but we really want to focus on the future because it gives us some hope.
And I think what people really want to know, though, Daryl, is after this game, are you finally on the Andrew Carlton bandwagon? Because I know that I've been saying he was really good for a long time. You haven't been as impressed. You didn't think he was very good at all. So I'm just wondering where you stand now.
For the record, that is not what's been happening. What this actually does feel like to me is there's been some names that we keep talking about on the show. We keep talking about Chris Durkin. We keep talking about Andrew Carlton.
This is true.
And this was almost like a bit of a coming out party was this game. Because I noticed that we've talked US Under-17s a little bit. We've talked Under-17s on the Top Draw Soccer show, which is our other show focused on youth soccer in partnership with TopDrawSoccer.com. But it hasn't really resonated, right? There hasn't been many people emailing us about it, getting all excited about it.
Yeah.
Because the team hasn't played in the way that excited us when we saw them in those friendlies. This game was that team playing the way that we've seen them play. Those players really showing off, literally in Andrew Carlton's case, in a good way. And it's finally caught people's attention.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited about it.
And here is my way of explaining that, is that I wrote an article for Paste a while back that was about 15 potential dual nationals who could make an impact for the U.S. national team. And the last one was Timothy Weah.
Yeah.
And the response to that was
French, Liberian, American.
George Weah's son, Jamaican in there too. George Weah's son could play for the United States. That's amazing. I had no idea. And this was after he was already with PSG and had already been making waves. And today, I heard two soccer coaches very excitedly talking about Timothy Weah and how he's George Weah's son.
When you were coaching today?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And it was okay, he's breaking through. He's making moves. Yeah.
So finally, this thing is and this could have happened, right? If the group stage wasn't that exciting, right? They didn't play that great against India or Ghana. They won. They lost to Colombia. There was a chance that, if they'd somehow failed against Paraguay, they wouldn't have, they're not making national headlines, right? They're not going to be on The Tonight Show or anything like that. Not unless they win it.
Yeah.
But for this result, they're not going to be on The Tonight Show. But there's a chance if they lost this game against Paraguay, that it would just be another failure. And then these players don't get the sort of excitement with the coaches you coach with this morning.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I would amend it to even say, and if they'd even, kind of struggled against Paraguay, dominate a little bit, maybe come away with a 1-0 or a 2-1 win, then lose to England. I think it's that same sort of this is what they do. It was okay, but not great. And maybe we should lower expectations a little bit, or they should stay where they are. But to kind of go out on a knockout round, even if they struggle against England, They smoked Paraguay.
They
really did. Yeah.
Should we get into specifics about what we enjoyed about this team then, which I think will probably include some analysis?
Do you just want me to say Andrew Carleton in different ways for the next 5 minutes?
Do you want to start there?
I mean, yeah.
It's weird. Well, here's the weird thing.
Yep.
Timothy Weah scored a hat-trick in this game.
Yep.
But I think Andrew Carleton was arguably, and I could happily make the argument that he had the bigger influence and was more important.
I think
he got 1 goal, 2 assists.
And 2 MLS assists.
But was involved in all 5 goals.
I mean,
right?
he had the assist for the assist in the other 2 goals.
Yeah.
So, yes. I mean, he had 2 secondary assists, 2 assists, and 1 goal. And I would say that the 2 MLS assists, as we call them, were even more impressive than the actual assists he got. Although those themselves were pretty impressive too.
So if you haven't seen these, the first goal the US scores in the first half, the only goal of the first half, it's a Timothy Weah goal from an Akinola sort of square ball, really good square ball. But it's a pass from Andrew Carleton that is. The more you see it, the more impressive it is. Because the first time I saw it, I just thought, he's just knocked it in behind for Akinola to run onto. It's kind of simple. But when you see it again, it's kind of, I don't know if it's first time, but it's fast. It's first time. And it is between 2 players who are 2 defenders who are 10 yards, one's 10 yards farther back than the other. And they're just a little bit right of each other, a little bit left of each other. But it's not even the width of a bowling alley that he plays this ball. It's actually a lot tighter, right?
He plays this lane. Certainly not a bowling alley.
If it was a bowling alley, then he's definitely got to hit that pass. It's not. It's like half the width of a bowling lane between those 2 players, and he slides that ball through. It is beautiful.
And again, I think it's off of Josh Sargent's chest, and he probably isn't going to get as much of the headlines because he only got the 1 goal, only 1 goal in this game, but also did a lot of that sort of off-the-ball work, off-the-ball running, hold-up play that I think we haven't necessarily seen from him in the past because he's been just sort of a breakthrough player who gets on the end of balls.
Yeah.
To see him have other aspects of his game, it makes you understand why maybe Werder Bremen were so interested.
Yeah, it was a lot like this sort of complete centre-forward performance that we've been hoping for, right? He did get a goal where he smashed it off the crossbar, like you said, but he also came deep, connected play, made smart touches, and set up a couple of things as well. He assisted Andrew Carleton.
I'm going to say an incredibly hyperbolic thing, and I'm okay with it. That might be the most complete performance I've seen from an American striker playing for a U.S. national team in a very long time.
Right? Think
about it for a second, because even when Josie Altidore does that sort of work, he doesn't necessarily then get the assist, get on the score sheet, have that sort of pounding goal off the bottom side of the crossbar and in. You don't see that kind of all-around game. Josh Sargent had an all-around game anyway. It comes from him. He holds it up. He chests it down. And then Andrew Carleton, it's not even just a pass. It's the outside of the foot, almost like a little rabbit punch.
Outside of the foot? I thought it was instep.
Oh, no, it's outside of his right foot rabbit punch that he just bends it perfectly in. But again, that makes it all the more interesting because it's a half-second realization of that pass is on, there's a gap there. If I hit it with the outside of the foot, I'll bend into the path and put it into the channel. Done.
You know, it's like Luke Skywalker hitting that shot in the exhaust port. Yep. It's such a tiny little gap and you've got to hit the exact target and you've got to weight it just right. That's what that pass was.
With the exception that I don't think Andrew Carleton is bullseyeing Womprats in his T16 back home.
No, he was bullseyeing Womprats in the Atlanta Academy. In the development academy.
Is that a thing they have? They just have rats running around?
Yeah, they have Womprats all over the training field.
That's upsetting. It's a new training facility. You think they wouldn't have that sort of infestation. But I want to say, so that ball was incredibly impressive, but sort of representative of the larger game from Andrew Carleton in the sense that he was just aggressive. And it was something that, again, we don't often see from American players. That he didn't hesitate. And yes, sometimes that meant he lost the ball in 1v1 situations. But I just felt like we saw him opening up, receiving the ball, and going at people. And even when he had a player on him or there was that pressure, it wasn't just nope, dropping it back, we're going to slow it down. It felt like this team's overall motivation was get the ball, get it forward, and then figure it out.
So here's what I think. I think people say that the US doesn't have a style, right? And I think that's been true of the men's senior team for a little while now. But when you watch U17, coached by John Hackworth, and you watch U20, coached by Tab Ramos, the US team does have a style, and it's a counter-attacking style. And what it means is that we win the ball either in defense or in midfield. It's not a high press.
I love what you say, we. I really do.
But when we win the ball back in defense or midfield, we don't wait. We really go fast. It's exchange passes quickly, play direct balls through, just like Andrew Carleton did for the first goal. And just like every time you see him, it's like a direct drive forward. You never slow down. It seems like the philosophy is that team is weak when they turn it over, so we go and we take risks. And sometimes that means Andrew Carleton dribbling into a defender and losing the ball. Yeah. Right? Sometimes that's what it means, but other times it means Andrew Carleton busting the defense wide open.
I also want to say, I know football purists would disagree, but counterattacking is a fine way to play. And if you disagree, I would say point to...
If you do it decisively.
Yeah, and with that in mind, like some of the most iconic moments in U.S. soccer history, you look at the win over Portugal in 2002, the win over Mexico in 2002 in those World Cups. A lot of those goals that you remember are coming from rapid counterattacks down the side. Landon Donovan in 2010, that's a counterattack.
Did you mention Spain, Confederations Cup?
I did not, but there you go. But that Algeria goal, like that's Algeria having a sustained amount of pressure trying to get the ball into the box, and then it goes from Tim Howard in a 90-yard throw or whatever, but that's a counterattack. And it's okay to have those sort of approaches to games.
Is the problem that when people say they want the US to have a style, what they actually want is for the US to be
Barcelona?
Like, to be like that era Spain team where it's tiki-taka possession, or they want... I mean, I kind of have sometimes wanted this. They want the pressing to be like a Chile pressing or Jurgen Klopp pressing where it's like all in, havoc, let's go for it. And I think that at the youth level we have established this sort of counter-press thing, but without taking too many risks. But the main thing is, when we win it back, we go immediately. It's a little bit like Leicester City. Leicester City did that when they won the Premier League. There was a lot of sort of play it forward quickly when we get the ball.
Yeah. And this is going to be way too harsh, but I'm cool with it. Have you ever seen stuff like Jimmy Kimmel used to do this, where he would have like little kids read serious pieces of dialogue from movies? No. And it is sort of hilarious because while they can read the dialogue, if you're 4 or 5, you don't quite get the emotional nuances of certain performances, so they can like say the dialogue, but they're not really like hitting that dramatic height. And I would say that like the United States could try to play possession soccer, but I don't know if they're necessarily going to like have the familiarity that say Barcelona or Spain do. And maybe they're then not quite capable of reading the dialogue that we would like them to read.
I do want to back us up a little bit because there will be people who noted correctly that Paraguay kind of played into the US's hands here. I think especially after the US scored 1 goal, Paraguay started pushing guys forward and really left it really open in midfield. You'll notice there was a lot of like, you could call it, people have called it a 4-2-4. It's kind of what they did because their wingers pushed high. And then so there was acres. There was actually a whole bowling alley, all the lanes to exploit. So it was easier for Andrew Carlton to drive through that midfield and for Akinola to sort of get down the wing and drive at people.
I don't disagree.
They made it
with
easy
that.
for us.
They did, but I would also say that it also takes a willingness to take advantage of that. And I think the United States did a good job of that. And little things, but stuff that we've talked about a lot, is like when you're the attacker, you've got the ball and you've got a step or two on the defender, you step across them. And either they have to slow up or they foul you. And I saw a lot of American players doing that. And I saw a lot of Paraguayan players stepping off or doing the hands up because they don't want to commit that foul. And then you have the opportunity if you're an American player.
I'd argue it's that decisiveness. If your team is, you're going to like pass short and then drive, or pass quickly and play balls through, you're going to go at them. The other team is automatically going to sort of rock back on their heels a little bit because they feel the storm coming every time you get the ball. Like, oh, there's a strong wind blowing in our direction.
And I think another big component in there is that with this U.S. team, you've got 4 very good attackers. We already talked about Andrew Carlton. We mentioned Timothy Weah's hat trick. We talked about Josh Sargent.
We haven't mentioned Timothy Weah's goal.
We've not.
Which there's not much to say about it other than that it's an incredible strike
from
the
second goal.
The top left corner of the box.
Yeah, I would say kind of the backbreaker there because maybe Paraguay still felt like they had some opportunities to exploit. Second half starts fairly early in the second half. You go to 2-0 down off of a really good strike, cutting inside, blasting it far corner. That'll work.
And to the point earlier, we were saying Andrew Carlton was involved in every goal. If you go back like 20 seconds in that goal, there is an Andrew Carlton back heel in midfield to break the defence wide open. I think it goes to Vasilev, right? But he just finds him in all kinds of space because he fools the defender who was trying to close them down. Sorry, I sidetracked us. You were saying we have a great front 4.
Yeah, because we've talked about those 3, and then the other one that we've only mentioned in bits and pieces here and there is Ayo Akinola, who I would say of those 4, I would say is maybe not quite at the technical level of the other 3. We saw moments where he kind of dribbled into people when he didn't need to, or like even in Timothy Weah's 3rd goal, the USA's 5th, the ball to Weah is on immediately, and it only ends up getting to him because Andrew Carlton makes an amazing pass after Ayo Akinola has tried to dribble through to goal, gotten dispossessed. Carlton takes one touch and then plays a reverse pass back across the top of the box for Timothy Weah to more or less tap in.
Yeah, I would say Akinola not always successful.
That's probably too harsh. It's still a good finish, but it's...
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
And Andrew Carlton makes that goal.
Akinola not always successful, but because he was always willing to just really, like, he's strong and he's fast and dribble at people, he had them sort of backing off. And sometimes the ball would pop loose. Sometimes Akinola would get down the line.
Yeah, I mean, he would, and sometimes he would put balls in the box or just cause problems or just draw fouls. But I want to say also, like at U17 level, I think one thing we've been frustrated by in the past is other national teams have players who are willing to try stuff and willing to do stuff, willing to be a little bit more technical or trust themselves. And I think Timothy Weah at times was frustrating in this game because I felt like he did get dispossessed a little bit too often in the first maybe 10 minutes and then in like the latter part of the first half. But he's taking people on. He's shooting from the top of the box when he has no business doing so, but puts it in the back of the net. And I think that's incredibly impressive for a 17-year-old, and it speaks to the confidence with which he's playing.
We've talked about the players that are going to get kind of all the headlines there are to have for the forwards.
I know who you want to talk about.
There's a guy that we both noticed sort of doing the clever, quiet work that made everything tick. And I want to say makes it possible for the other guys to charge forward.
I don't want to say that.
And his name is Chris Goslin.
And I don't want to say that because he's suspended for the England game.
He is. That's tough. We'll maybe talk about England later, maybe we can maybe replace Chris Goslin, hopefully. But I think this is the game where I really got a feel for why Chris Goslin is so important.
He's the shield, man. He's the shield. So it really is that like kind of number 6 locking it down. And I think just does a lot of those moments where we've talked about before, when you watch a game live, you have all the emotion in it. You really want the United States to win. So you're not quite so focused on all the other stuff that's happening. You're focused on who's got the ball now, who's scoring the goals. And he's a player, I think, now and hopefully in the future, when you go back, you'll be like, oh, that 15-pass move that ends on a goal starts with him being in the exact right position because he left one man to slide over to cover another man, but then he slid back and filled the space and intercepted the ball, and then he launched that attack.
I want to say he was the smartest player out there reading the game in terms of being in the right place at the right time. And then taking, I want to say, skillful little passes that look simple, but were actually sort of him quickly changing the angle and then spraying the ball. Not spraying the ball, not big passes, but like clever little angled passes to start moves. And I think if you're going to have those counterattacks, you need a guy like that who does that.
Yeah, absolutely. And combining in sequence and like kind of being the one little outlet, but then playing simple, but then also trying stuff on his own. It was a very good performance all around from him. And
the problem is, as you mentioned earlier, Chris Goslin got his second yellow card of the tournament in the game against Paraguay, and so will be suspended for the quarterfinal game, which is this coming Saturday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, against England. It is USA-England in the U17 World Cup quarterfinal. See the smile on my face? This is because I've got a team in the semifinals.
Okay. You have 2 teams in the semifinals.
No, I've got 2 teams in the quarterfinals. I've got 8
No, they're both going to go through. That's how it's going to work. You didn't know that? If they both play well enough, they bump somebody else out.
I think you were briefly confused about what round this was.
I don't know what you're talking about. I think that I also decided to correct you on your fandom.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be quiet for a while as you talk.
I don't know what to say. I mean, except we watched a bit of the England v Japan game. England look like they have some dangerous players. They do not have Jadon Sancho.
They do not.
Right? They don't have Jadon Sancho, who's been recalled by Dortmund. So there's at least not that sort of super-duper star to fear. But there are some good players, right? There's Phil Foden, the number 7. Have I got his name correct? The Manchester City little guy plays on the right wing, at least in the last game. He looked very clever and very dangerous. There was a moment against Japan where he took a high ball out of the air and flicked it up to himself and volleyed it in a way that made me think, oh, that could be trouble.
Can I say what takes a little bit of the intimidation factor off of his game? His name is Phil Foden, which that was the face I was making because I knew it was Foden. I didn't really realize that it was Philip Foden.
Why is that? What?
Phil Foden? There's no way you're afraid of a guy named Phil Foden.
You think you should change his name to like Max Power?
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Max First Touch.
Yeah, sure, exactly. No, he's a very good player. Yes, I'm thankful that Jadon Sancho won't be there as well, because there are definitely some technical players in there that could certainly cause problems, especially with Chris Goslin not being there to help out.
Right, yeah, there's Hudson-Odoi, number 14, you have to look out for, and Angel Gomes is how I'm going to pronounce it. Angel Gomes, Manchester
much like you're Portuguese hedging your USA-England fandom, you're hedging the England-Portugal influence there for Mr. Angel Gomez?
So who knows? Here's what I'm thinking. England won't be as open as Paraguay were, but I feel like they will be more front foot, like trying to win the game. So there will be opportunities for the US to counter-attack, right? So if we're going to previewing this game now, I suppose, there will be opportunities for the US to counter-attack. Can they do it without Chris Goslin?
It's going to be difficult. I think what it will most likely mean, in my opinion, is that you see Chris Durkin step forward and then you find somebody else to play center back, because that's sort of been the approach to this tournament of somebody can play center back, right?
Yeah. Can we back up a bit to talk about
the way this U.S. team is approaching center back is the way our rec team approaches goalkeeper when our goalkeeper isn't there. Like, somebody can do it. We'll figure it out.
So, yeah, if people don't know, I think the first choice centre-back, I think it's Arturo Vasquez, was injured, so is not part of this U17 team. Tyler Shaver, who I know is a centre-back with New York City FC, he might be half injured, so he hasn't been starting. So the centre-backs for the US have literally been James Sands, who's a defensive midfielder, Chris Durkin, who's a defensive midfielder, a very, very good defensive midfielder, maybe as good as or better than Chris Goslin, right? And Jalen Lindsay, who's a right-back, has also been filling in. And this is the weakness of this US national team, to me, is that they've never had a pair of centre-backs playing centre-back in this tournament. And you've seen them concede a couple of goals from sort of balls directly into the box. I think from a throw against Colombia, that it was allowed to bounce and then Colombia finished. Corners and crosses, US have looked a little shaky on. And I do think that's where England can really succeed against the US, is by targeting the centre-backs who aren't centre-backs.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be an area of opportunity for England because, as you mentioned, you've got that sort of vulnerability that we've seen in the past. But I also think that some of those England players that you mentioned previously are so good with the ball at their feet that they can kind of combine as a team, like play the ball through the middle, play it out wide, get it back in the middle, get a shot on target. Yeah. But they can also create opportunities by themselves, and they're very tricky at times. Yeah. And I could see a person who's not quite comfortable being a center back either stepping and being a little too aggressive and making a mistake and either getting beat or conceding a foul, or I'm going to call it doing the Omar and backing off because you don't want to commit too much, but then suddenly you're breaking the offside line or you're not quite committing and you're giving them space to cross or shoot.
I would slightly disagree in that I think having these like defensive midfielders play centre-back in a Chile kind of way, right? In a Gary Medel kind of way or a Javier Mascherano kind of way, they're better when guys are dribbling at them.
Just to clarify, listeners, Daryl knows that Javier Mascherano is not Chilean. He's just transitioning into another midfielder who plays centre-back. Before we hear Javier Mascherano is not Chilean.
Someone's half written that tweet already. You can delete it.
Almost certainly.
It's fine. I hope you didn't send it. Those defensive midfielders playing centre-back are, I think, more comfortable with having guys dribble at them, and it's like a one-on-one situation like that, than they are with crosses being pumped into the box and they have to get up and win their headers. So I'm not so worried about them one-on-one. I'm more worried about if England target that and think, we're going to lift some balls in and see if you guys can deal with it.
I think these are crocodile tears. I can't tell if you're worried about anything because you're still kind of sitting on that fence. I think I might force you into making a decision.
I do. Okay, here's honestly how
I know what your decision is, but it's fine.
Do you really?
Yeah.
What is it?
You're okay with either theoretically, but you want England to win.
I want the US to win.
Really?
Because
everyone's sad?
These are bad times for the United States. Yeah. I mean, it is, right? They're terrible, terrible times for the US not qualifying for the World Cup. Having a U17 team to give us faith in the future go to the semi-finals would be absolutely massive.
Plus, England already won a penalty shootout.
That was genuinely my point.
Really?
I know people joke about that, but watching England win a penalty shootout in a tournament fills me with hope. If you didn't, let's talk about it. If you didn't see it, the England goalkeeper, I don't know his first name, Anderson, Mr. Anderson, we'll call him.
Yeah, that's right. I feel like there's a possibility that it might be Curtis.
Okay. Is it Curtis?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Anderson was in goal for England. He's a Man City player. He took a penalty in the penalty shootout and scored it. He also...
This is my favorite part.
...yelled at Japanese players as they were stepping up to take their kicks. He yelled things like, I got you. I got you.
Now there's a chance...
The arrogance of being so confident is completely un-English in terms of what we've done in the past 25, 30 years on penalty kicks. I'm excited about this change of direction.
So I think you're right. I would say the only caveat is that with this one, there weren't so many fans there, so there wasn't like deafening crowd noise. If this were England versus Japan in a World Cup, you know that stadium's going to be full, so maybe you can't quite hear what he's saying. But because the mics were right there and there wasn't so much crowd noise, you could absolutely hear him. I'm not even going to say just talking. It was definitely yelling / screaming.
But even if the mics didn't pick it up, you could still see like the stare he was giving him, and you could see his mouth moving.
There's some smiles in that confident smile.
Yeah, that's not normally what goalkeepers do. They normally sort of stand quietly or they move around or whatever, but they don't like physically, like verbally intimidate you.
All right. So yes, England won. Just going to throw this in there. Got to make more than one save if you're going to do that. You can't be screaming, I got you, I got you, I got you, and then get beat.
Well, here's the only scenario I don't want for this game is the USA go through on penalty kicks, because then the England those players are psychologically damaged from penalty kicks once again. I want them, if US are going to win, it's got to be in normal time. Right. There's worth noting, no extra time. It goes 90 minutes, penalty kicks.
Right. That's why we're already jumping to the penalty kick scenario.
Yeah.
Or scenario, if you prefer, Daryl.
Here's a question for the USA, right? So often when we've seen this U17 team over the past 18 months or so, past year or so, they have gone 4-3-3, right? 3 central midfielders, and then they've gone usually like Carlton on the left, Sargent centre forward, Akinyola on the right. And it gives you a lot of bodies in central midfield. It's good for that pressing type thing because those guys are all good at winning the ball. It was like Gosling, Durkin and Ferry usually. Now Weah's got a hat-trick. Andrew Carlton didn't play on the wing, played number 10, which was a big decision by John Hackworth for this Paraguay game, and it super worked out. We've lost Ferry, it looked like, to injury, which is actually quite important. Chris Gosling is suspended. What does the US do formation-wise? Do you think they go back to the 4-3-3, try and shore up the numbers in central midfield? Or do they go the 4-2-3-1, which sounds similar but is different because Andrew Carlton's role is very different, right? He wears number 11, but he's playing underneath Josh Sargent as a number 10.
I think it makes the most sense to stick with what worked at least against Paraguay and stick with that 4-2-3-1. Yes, you have to juggle a little bit. We don't know the extent of the injury to Ferry. We know he came off. We don't know.
It was bad enough to come out in the first half, right?
But I think with that, you kind of want to keep the pieces that have been working where they're working. And I think also if the United States is going to try to break on the counter, which I think they should against England, and kind of use the ability of Josh Sargent, but also his hold-up play, and then use the kind of attacking pace down the wings that they've been using, it makes sense to keep those 3 components where they are in that 4-2-3-1, have Andrew Carlton kind of dictating possession through the middle to the extent possible, then get 2 defensive midfielders screening that back 4. I think that gives you the biggest chance for success.
So it would be Durkin, who we're big fans of, and maybe Vasilev, who's the guy that came in for Ferry.
Possibly.
That's kind of what it has to be, right?
Yep.
And then the other big decision to make is who plays fullback, because there's a bunch of fullbacks who have all performed really well. I've liked everyone I've seen. Like Gosling, Dest, Lindsay when he's played. Akil Watts, I think, played in the most recent game. And then who plays centre-back? Does Tyler Shaver come back in? Or do you get Jalen Lindsay back in the defence again? Or do you think, like, we're so short we have to play Chris Durkin there and then we've got a hole in midfield? It's a genuine problem that Tab Ramos, John Hackworth has to solve.
Yeah, Tab Ramos might and likely will have different problems in the near future. But until then, it is, I think, one of the negatives to playing players out of position. Or in this situation, if you have Chris Durkin as a center back, if he's just a straight up center back, he's playing center back. We know that. But if you want to now fill in for Chris Gosling by moving Chris Durkin forward, then you've got to move a fullback into center back. Well, then who plays fullback? And suddenly you're moving lots of pieces around in a way that you're probably not too comfortable with heading into a knockout round game.
Can I put a final word on this game? Is we've been all excited about the development academies that are producing talent, and we said, there's that missing age group for US soccer, but this is the age group that's going to shine.
Yep.
This will be the development academies of Major League Soccer plus one guy from PSG versus Premier League youth academies. It really is that kind of matchup, right? Because all these guys on the England team play for like Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man United, one for Wolverhampton, yes. But it's a proper matchup of like seeing where those guys are at, and you can see these guys are better at this, or you can't, like, it's only one game, but still there's a lot to be gained from watching this game and comparing the two youth systems.
And with that, I'll just say, we're coming for you, Philip.
Okay, Taylor, we're going to talk senior US men's national team because there's been some news.
If we must.
But first, we have a new sponsor on today's show.
Tell us about that sponsor, Daryl Grove.
It's Storelli. Storelli is a sports equipment company, and they have the Speed Grip insoles. They're an upgrade to your standard insoles. Speed Grip gives you more traction, which means more speed, more power, and more control. How do they do that, Taylor?
Well, essentially, it reduces slipping and sliding in your footwear. It prevents you from wasting energy. And I can say that there are definitely times when if the boot is a little bit too loose, or if the insole is, as old insoles sometimes do, tends to go, you do have that thing where like you kind of have to like clench your toes almost to make sure you have that grip and you just feel a little bit more in control. These will not make you have to do that.
So the idea is that the Speed Grip insole kind of bonds with the bottom of your foot. And from what I've been told by the people at Storelli and on their material, it's a weird feeling to begin with because you're not used to it sort of being that tightly gripped. But the lack of slipping gains you some extra traction, which means like it's not going to make you like 10 miles an hour faster, right? Because I think like fast players are like 20 miles an hour.
No, 15 miles, I think is what they said.
It's going to gain you just those split seconds of extra sort of reaction time and speed when you take off.
I'll also say, like, and we've talked about this before, when you have to focus on other things, it takes focus away from other things. And if suddenly you have that little bit where you don't have to like focus on like clenching your toes to make sure you've got control or whatever, then you're focused on other things, and it frees you up to do other things that you wouldn't otherwise necessarily be able to do.
So here's my plan. We have them between now and Saturday to get speed grip insoles to all of the US under-17
I like this
team.
plan.
Because if you think of like the counter-attack thing that we've been talking about, imagine if you could make that a split second faster.
Yep.
That could be the difference between the under-17s going to the semi-finals or not.
We could also, like Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, this situation where we...
What's that mean?
We just say, like, these are magic insoles, and you can't possibly lose when you wear them. Then all the players put them in, and they're like, yeah, I feel really good to go. Let's go win this game. And suddenly you've given that extra mental motivation as well.
I also believe this with something...
I think this is a brilliant idea.
With something like speed grip, like the science is sound, as I understand it, isn't it? There's less traction, therefore you are faster. But just if you have in your head, I'm faster, it actually it becomes real because you have that feeling, right?
Yeah. Clearly you haven't read Harry Potter, otherwise you would know this already.
I've seen the movies.
Unacceptable.
Worth saying, speed grip doesn't make you fly in the air, like in Quidditch, does make you fly on the ground.
There we are. So, if you listeners, or if our listeners, Daryl Grove, would like to try some new insoles, how can they do that?
First of all, you can get a 10-day trial. So if you get these, you buy these, they're $40, they're $39.99. If you don't like them after 10 days, send them back, you can get a refund, right? Even better than that, you can get 20% off at storelli.com, STORELLI.com, and that's 20% that is good site-wide. Anything you find on storelli.com, because they do a lot of other sports equipment, you get 20% off with the discount code TSS. TSS for 20% off. 20% off the speed grip insoles, 20% off anything else you see on storelli.com. Link will be in the show notes.
It will indeed. Thank you to Storelli for sponsoring today's show. Now, on to some more U.S. conversations?
Yes. So the big news, a couple of days ago now, is that the U.S. has scheduled its first post-disaster friendly, and it's away to Portugal on November 14th. Why are people down about this? I saw a lot of people react very negatively to this.
Because now we're the cannon fodder? I was going to tweet that and you told me not to.
So, but what I was going to say is that there were going to be friendlies scheduled for November anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this isn't like a warm-up for this isn't the week before the World Cup. That's when you're the cannon fodder, is when you're the send-off series team. This is different. We would have been playing friendlies anyway, November of 2017.
Yeah, but I feel like historically we're playing those friendlies with an eye towards, like, all right, we got to get used to playing on European soil away from the United States, and we got to get, like, our European contingent ready and playing together.
Yeah.
And there's just always at the end of it...
Which, by the way, is, for me, is a problem with the US national team setup as a whole, that we have this split, like, MLS-based players, European-based players. Yeah. We don't get them all together regularly.
Well, but I think to answer your question, though, that is always historically with an eye towards, okay, this didn't work or that didn't work, but we got time to prepare because the World Cup's coming up and we got to be ready. And now it's like, all right, well, we played some friendlies. See you in 18 months. It's like it still is. That is still until the World Cup is over. Every game the United States plays, and I'm not trying to make this worse, but it's the reality. Every game the senior men's national team plays will be a reminder that they're not going to the World Cup. That's just how it's going to be.
Of course that's true. I think it doesn't have to be as much of a downer as people are thinking of it, though, because if it was the same old, right? If it was the same roster that was selected against Panama and Trinidad and the games previous that was going to play Portugal in November, I'm not even sure I would watch. Right, because I just wouldn't be excited about it. But we are expecting, and maybe we're too optimistic, but we are expecting that the roster for this game will be full of youngsters. We're hoping to see Weston McKennie,
see, this is the
Jonathan
thing,
Gonzalez,
we're hoping for that. Why are we expecting that?
Because how can it not be? Like, if this roster has like Graham Zusi, DeMarcus Beasley, and all those guys on it, why would you have the same old to go and play these games?
I don't know if you'd go that level of it, but as I said, as I said before, like if you have somebody come in who doesn't have quite the familiarity, I'm assuming it would be Tab Ramos, and maybe that changes things.
That's the other reason I think it is that. I think the interim head coach is going to be Tab Ramos, and that automatically leads to him calling up the guys that he's worked with, because it just makes sense for his role to be to get those U20 and under players in there.
Because I'll say this, if it's Tab Ramos, there's a decent chance he's an interim manager. If he wants the permanent job, maybe he does feel like he has to get some results and show an improved performance. And maybe that means like, I'll stick with this guy and this guy. He's young. He's not quite proven. I'll go with this guy instead. And suddenly you
he gets scared of Ronaldo and the other Portuguese players, and is like, I need some more experience to make sure I win this game.
And that's going to be a mistake. To go all the way back to your initial question, I think I am like not so optimistic about this game until there is reason for optimism. But right now, the United States Soccer Federation has not given me any reason for that. Look at World Cup qualifying. Look at the way things have been dealt with since then. Until that coach is there and that roster is named, I'm going to have a little bit of trepidation. And if you just call in like one or two young players, it's not going to be enough.
So yeah, if it's just like Weston McKennie and let's say Tyler Adams.
If it's Weston McKennie is called into camp and plays 10 minutes at the end of the Portugal friendly when he's the 7th sub,
you will smash that nice TV.
I will not be pleased. I will not be pleased. I will sit quietly, and then the listeners will hear about it afterwards.
Yeah, because I've come up with a name for the midfield that I want to see. So we've been talking about Tyler Adams, Jonathan Gonzalez, Weston McKennie. It's the AGM. I want the AGM midfield. Why? AGM, it's like annual general meeting that people say AGM.
That's not quite as catchy as MSN.
This is an early draft.
Okay. I was just ready. You built up to it. I was like, oh, he's been working on this. I wasn't sure if it was going to be an acronym, a portmanteau. I was excited for what came.
But there is an opportunity with all the new players that I'm hoping to see that we can start putting together new acronyms and portmanteaus. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying my first draft was great, but maybe there'll be a BBC or MSN in the future for the US men's national team.
You're trying your hardest, Daryl. That's all anyone can ask. Now build me a house or I'm moving to Austin. Now the other issue here is the coach of the national team. Now we think still that Tab Ramos is the favorite, but suddenly we've got some other names thrown in there, Daryl.
We do. And again, just so if people don't know, the idea is that there's an interim probably appointment and then there's a permanent appointment later, like probably 2018, maybe after there's the presidential election, right? And it may not be Sunil Gulati, who's the US
I think after the World
anymore.
Cup is the key thing for me because
there's more availability. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You can look at like, okay, that guy did well. Maybe he's ready for a new challenge. Let's throw some money at him and see what happens.
But that hasn't stopped other high-profile coaches throwing their hat into the ring.
Go ahead
in
and throw
recent
some quotation marks
days.
around high-profile.
Okay, Sam Allardyce has let it be known,
also not high-profile,
that he would be interested in the US men's national team job.
Yes.
You are not thrilled about it.
No, I'm not.
Well, I guess tell me, I'm a little more happy about it. I guess because maybe there's an element of bias because...
Oh, the guy who resigned in disgrace? You want me to tell you why I'm not so optimistic about it?
I guess, yeah, go on.
I mean, number one, he resigned his previous job in disgrace after one game in charge?
Yeah.
He did have one, right?
He did win. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. 100% record.
Slovakia away.
That counts.
Yeah, he's got the best record of any England manager ever.
That's baseball, baby, says Charlie Kelly after 72 beers, I think. Anyway, I think so that is part of it. That it's like, oh, great, the guy who was like recorded being corrupt and was thrown out of his job. Mm-hmm. That's not ideal.
Right.
But also, I mean, you go to what Sam Allardyce is famous for, and it's like pragmatism, you don't get relegated. Not a threat for the United States. But it's just sort of like,
I don't know, we were just relegated out of the World Cup, so think of it that way.
Yeah.
I'll say this, Sam Allardyce would have got a draw in Trinidad.
I would say Sam Allardyce would have been a great candidate after Jurgen Klinsmann, I think. But right now, again, to go to our point about, like, we want to see young faces, I don't know if that's Sam Allardyce. We want to see...
You mean specifically his face?
Yeah, he certainly is not young, but, like, I don't know if he's going to have an emphasis on calling in young players. I also don't know if he's going to have an emphasis on anything right away because... he's got time. Like, there's no real urgency, and I'd much rather have a candidate who feels, or an interim manager or a new manager who feels that sense of urgency, who feels fans are upset, players are upset, we got to get some results, we got to get things going. And I just feel like Sam Allardyce might be kind of more of the same pragmatism, practical approach, 4-4-2, 4-5-1, let's sit deep, let's defend, we'll get some goals, we'll get some wins, it'll be 1-0.
The reason I feel a bit more pro Sam Allardyce, it's not just his Englishness and, if I'm honest, his West Midlands.
It's because it's Allardyce? Is that what you want?
Yeah, well, there is that whole thing of Allardyce. I don't know if you're referring to this, but comes about from the idea that because he's got like a West Midlands accent and he looks kind of gruff, that people don't think of him as the sort of deep thinking sort of coach who takes on new ideas that he really is. Like, he was one of the first to use stats. He's very into sort of new technology. He's also, you use the word pragmatism.
You forget the famous quote, Daryl Grove.
What's that?
He out-tacticked Jose Mourinho.
But he did. That's the thing. He actually did.
And he said it, I love how he said it gloatingly. Oh, big
But do you remember we were talking the other day about how one of my ideal managers would be Jose Mourinho because I want a US coach who goes into each game with like a highly prepared tactical plan of here's how we handle this game. These are the situations we're prepared for. I'm going to make moves and counter moves to make this happen. Like, when people call Sam Allardyce a pragmatist, it doesn't just mean like long ball, get someone's head on it, right? He really does plan for each game. And that's why I think he would actually actually, that's why I think he would have been a good England manager on the field. And I think it's why he'd be a useful US manager if we put this is where a technical director would make sense to me, is if it was an American above him who is sort of making sure he understands how US soccer works.
But I want to say this, though, that like with Sam Allardyce, it's not as though he was this like consensus, obviously, like he has been doing so well that he deserves the England job. It was sort of like,
at the time,
we got like, there's a couple other options, none of them are that motivating. Sure, let's just go with Sam Allardyce. It then it ended the way it did.
Don't use the FA as your decision-making model.
Well, no, but more
many
so, like it's not as though he was on this like super hot run of form and everyone was like, yes, he's the interim manager, he's the person we want to go with. It was sort of like, yeah, okay, he'll do. And then he resigned in disgrace. So I just feel like he gets built up a little bit because of his reputation for not getting relegated. Not saying he's not a great coach, but it is not the like inspiring change of pace, new direction sort of manager I would like to see brought in.
Would you feel better about it if there was a technical director working with him?
I really don't think I would feel good about Sam Allardyce coming in.
Okay.
And I think part of that, if I'm being perfectly honest, and maybe this is, I don't know, ageist or anti-British, I'm not sure. But like
You are both those things, for the record.
Oh, this is true.
I'm not looking forward to getting old. I'm going to get a lot of grief from you.
I'm definitely not, by the way, ageist, because again,
I know,
gerontology. Yeah. But I will add this.
And you have a
much.
British workplace acquaintance.
Do I?
Yeah.
Workplace proximity associate, I believe. It's just that, like, just that sort of like Big Sam, pint glasses of wine, sitting back, being a little bit too relaxed to the extent that he's talking.
If you want to get the most value for wine, you get it in a big pint glass. You don't buy three different glasses. You get it in a pint glass.
All right, but here's what I mean though. Like in that video, he's just so like confident and like laid back that he's not even like doesn't even care that he's like being filmed talking about like basically
third-party ownership and how to get around the rules.
And how to get around the rules. And so there's just...
He could navigate the labyrinth of MLS rules, though.
But there's just a part of me that sees him, like, kind of like, that pictures him just sitting there, like, drinking some wine, looking at the US, being like, like, no competitive games, no real pressure for at least 18 months. I can kind of do what I want, just travel around the United States.
Lots of zeros on the paycheck.
I'll have a bit of that. Yeah. Like, it just feels a little bit like, yeah, sure, why not?
It does, okay.
After I've retired from soccer.
All right, so
also key point there.
I stand by my point that he is a good tactical manager who genuinely would be able to assemble a group of players and get the most out of them. But I think the thing you've just made me realize is that it's not accurate to say he's applying for this job for the right reasons. It probably is like, oh yeah, I used to live in Florida. He played for Tampa Bay Rowdies in the NASL back in the day, right? Like, I kind of like America, be a bit of a jolly up. They pay me good money. So he's maybe not coming from a good place.
No, he's definitely not. Again, Daryl Grove, this is... Like, maybe this is my bias.
Use my full name.
But this is so much Daryl John Grove. There's so much Daryl Grove bias here that, like, again, if I said... Laurent Blanc, who's also thrown his hat into the ring.
Has Laurent Blanc actually said something, or is this just a rumor?
I saw that headline,
okay.
So it's probably just a rumor, and there are reasons to be concerned about that as well. But it's like, if he had retired from soccer, which Big Sam did, then after resigning his national team position in disgrace following this like scandal about third-party ownership and breaking rules, after like a career that was sort of up and down, I don't think you'd be like, yes, get him in there. Let's see what he can do. I don't think you'd be like, he's a tactical genius.
Can I have one question? Does Laurent Blanc have a West Midlands accent?
I don't know. Probably more of a Mancunian accent, if anything. Probably more of a French accent, if anything, is what I mean to say.
Okay, point taken.
Yeah.
The other question this raises,
but I know lots of people are excited about this. I do want to say that. Like,
people are excited about Sam Allardyce.
I think so. I think a lot of people think he is a practical choice, and our friend Pav thought it would be a good hire, and then I probably got in my car and drove away. So
without acknowledging,
pretty much, just made unbroken eye contact as I walked away, got in the car, and even driving away. It was risky, but I went for it.
Richmond Police. That is not what Taylor did. Worth noting.
I was texting too.
Get out of it. It raises the question of if it's Allardyce or if it's Blanc, do we feel like a European manager is the right choice, or are we expecting an American manager? Because I feel like with the expected Tab Ramos interim appointment, which we're going to hear about soon, right, I think, is it that we're sort of thinking, oh, that's American in the short term, and we haven't yet dealt with the idea that there could be a coach who's not American in the future? Because even Klinsmann... Like, I spent a long time in California and was kind of American in some ways.
I think honestly, my honest answer, and I don't mean to like kind of dodge the question, it's just that I don't think there is an obvious candidate. If there were an obvious candidate, everybody would be saying that. But the reality is the obvious candidates are Tab Ramos, a couple different MLS coaches / half of Major League Soccer, depending on some of the lists you'll read.
You could make a case for most MLS
and then like
coaches.
People always throw in like Bielsa for some reason. Bielsa gets thrown in there. And then there's like one or two long shots that tend to make the list. But there's no sort of obvious candidate. And the thing that I go back to is when McLaren resigned for England, there was all this talk of, oh, it's going to be Mourinho. Or was it when Capello, when Capello resigned.
Yeah, I'm not sure McLaren resigned so much as was thrown through the door.
Yes. But either way, you remember when there was all that...
And then they threw his umbrella after him. Take this with you.
Your Brawley?
Yeah.
Yeah. But you remember that time period, right, where it was like, oh, is it going to be Mourinho? And that was the obvious one.
I think it almost was, based on what... I think his wife talked him out of it, but it almost was Mourinho, I think.
And I guess that's good in the end. I'm pretty happy with it in the end. But... It doesn't feel like you have that sort of huge name that would obviously want the job. There are reasons to connect them. So you end up with okay, I could see that. Okay, that'd be exciting. And there are certainly names that I would like to see thrown in there. I just don't know if the United States right now is a big enough draw to get some of those names that people want.
So maybe the thing is to appoint the interim coach, whoever he may be, right? It could be Tab Ramos. We keep saying that. It could be, and I mean this very sincerely, if it's just like a caretaker type thing, it could be Landon Donovan.
Yep.
Imagine if it's like...
I still stand by Stu Holden, because I don't think Tab Ramos wants to be interim manager.
Stu Holden would also be great, but Landon Donovan has expressed some interest in coaching, right? Didn't he coach the MLS homegrown team
at
the All-Star game?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Sure.
But I could just see it being like a good figurehead type appointment, and everyone feels good for a few months until after the World Cup, and then it's then we really do a survey of the big names available. Let's see who we can get.
I want to go I'm just going to go hipster here. I want to find one candidate that's you know who we're not talking about? Carlos Queiroz. Let's get him on board. Who may still be in Iran, or I think last I saw was in Iraq. I don't know where he is anymore. But I feel like there needs to be that candidate out there as well, who's just this guy who you've never heard of.
All right,
could be the best.
By tomorrow's show, we'll come up with the hipster candidate.
All right. I like this man. Sampaoli?
Whoever the St. Pauli coach is, get him in there.
No, Jorge Sampaoli.
Oh,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's the one.
He has taken Argentina to the World Cup. Yeah.
Even so.
So he's succeeded.
Come on. Who would you rather manage?
I think Argentina.
I mean, we've talked about the U17s here. I'm just saying. Andrew Carlton knew Leo Messi.
Oh, I did want to end on this because we're coming towards the end of the show. Andrew Carlton, Chris Goslin performing so well for the US under-17s. I think when we talk about US player development, a big thing is going to be what happens in Atlanta next year with Tata Martino and Andrew Carlton and Chris Goslin.
Yeah.
Because once those guys are through the development academy, they're homegrown players. There's no more U17 World Cup because that becomes your focus for the year, right? And that was their focus for the year this year. Next season, 2018, there's got to be the next step is to get those guys in that team, right? They could go on loan to USL, maybe to Charleston Battery, but what we really want after this great performance at the World Cup so far is to get them into the Atlanta United team. And there's going to be big pressure on MLS next year to get those kids on the field.
There won't be pressure on MLS, though. There'll be pressure on...
From me, there will be. I'll be writing emails every day.
I mean, there'll be pressure on Tata Martino theoretically, but by the same token, if he's got a formula that's working, I mean, there's always going to be injuries. MLS is a long season. There'll be opportunities for them to play. The question is, will they get those consistent minutes that we'd like to see? That I don't have an answer to.
I can already feel our 2018 MLS preview coming.
Yep.
It's going to be a lot about which kids has this team got and how many minutes will they play.
Right now, I feel like our 2017 predictions were closer all around than they've ever been before. So I am kind of excited for more season previews.
Yep.
Let's just skip right through the playoffs and into the next season preview.
That's a terrible idea.
I have one completely unrelated question for you. Really, it's not anything we've talked about. I had a friend text me this.
Yeah.
So the World Cup playoffs for Europe were announced, right? I forget who Sweden got, but if Sweden were to qualify, advance, I think they might have gotten Italy. So long shot there. If they did, do you think there's a chance that Zlatan unretires, having never played at a World Cup before?
It depends how his injury rehab goes, right? If he's suddenly scoring... Does he sign with Man United?
He's already signed, yeah.
If he's suddenly scoring a bunch of goals...
Yes, he's going to play for them in January.
If he's scoring a bunch of goals for Man United in March, then and Sweden make the World Cup, then I think there's a very good chance.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting. Because he's, never been to a World Cup before, but has been retired for a while. So we'll see what happens. I was just... my friend Matt texted me to ask that, and I said, I don't know. I'll ask Daryl. That was my exact reaction.
My answer's yes.
Okay.
All right, so we should wrap this up.
Sure.
So Champions League happened today. We will be back Wednesday. We're going to review the Champions League action, right? We'll take a look around at everything that happened, maybe do a bit of thumbs up, thumbs down on the Champions League. If there's any more US news, we'll obviously get to it when it happens. I've checked my phone a couple of times just to see if there's any Ramos announcement. I'm kind of just waiting for that to come so we can start thinking about that November roster.
Alrighty.
All right. Until tomorrow.
Yes,
Taylor
sir.
Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
I did it, Christopher Walkinstar.
I appreciate that.
Listeners, thank you for
Remove
listening.
that punctuation.
And we'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Slice it.